The year is 464 BCE. The Eurotas River Valley in southern Greece, a region ruled by the most feared, uncompromising military machine of the ancient world, Sparta. By every rule of ancient warfare, their hegemony is absolute, built on rigorous agoge training and a deeply ingrained oligarchic warrior ethos. But on an unrecorded day, the city is brought to its knees, not by a rival army, but by the earth beneath their feet. Without warning, a massive 7.2 magnitude earthquake rips through the Sparta fault. The sheer force of the rupture carves a visible 20-kilometer-long scar into the earth. In an instant, the city of Sparta is effectively razed to its foundations. The city's timber-framed mud brick structures collapse completely. According to ancient historians like Plutarch and Strabo, when the dust finally clears, only 5 houses are left standing in the entire city. In the gymnasium, the roof caves in, crushing groups of young Spartan elites as they exercise. Ancient accounts claim up to 20,000 perish, wiping out a massive portion of the ruling citizen warrior class in a matter of seconds. But the true catastrophe for the Spartan state isn't the shattered buildings. It is who survives the rubble. Sparta's power relies entirely on the Helots, a subjugated population of state-owned serfs who outnumber Spartan citizens by an overwhelming 7-to-1. After generations of brutal agricultural labor and ritual humiliation, the Helots view this disaster as the wrath of Poseidon. They see a divine opportunity. Amidst the chaos and the corpses of their oppressors, they rise up. The survivors flee to the defensible mountain stronghold of Mount Ithome, igniting a violent, coordinated insurrection. The invincible Spartans suddenly find themselves trapped in a desperate 10-year-long siege against their own serfs. The situation becomes so dire that Sparta makes an unthinkable, humiliating decision. They beg their democratic rival, Athens, for military aid. This is a forensic audit of how a 7.2 magnitude seismic event completely paralyzed the ancient world's most terrifying military state. It is the story of how a ruptured fault line accelerated the collapse of the Spartan population, sparked the Third Messenian War, and fostered a bitter paranoia that permanently severed the Spartan-Athenian alliance. Ultimately, this is the story of how an earthquake lit the fuse for the devastating Peloponnesian War. The Sparta region in the southern Peloponnese lies within the overriding Aegean plate at the Hellenic subduction zone, where the African plate subducts northward beneath the Eurasian plate. Seismic hazard in the region stems from this subduction, though Laconia has recorded low instrumental seismicity since antiquity, with sparse moderate events in the modern record. Paleoseismic studies indicate recurrence intervals of large earthquakes on the Sparta fault on the order of 3,000 years, consistent with its role in generating the 464 BC event. The earthquake was recorded by ancient historians, including Thucydides and Diodorus Siculus, who describe its occurrence during the reign of King Archidamus II of Sparta. Paleoseismological evidence from trench excavations along the Sparta fault corroborates this timing, dating a major rupture to approximately 2800 plus or minus 300 years before present, aligning with the historical event. No precise day or month is specified in surviving ancient accounts. The epicenter was located near ancient Sparta in the Laconia region of the Peloponnese Peninsula, southern Greece. The event primarily affected the Eurotas River Valley and surrounding settlements, with damage extending to nearby city-states such as Seleucia and possibly influencing areas up to Messene. The magnitude of the 464 Sparta earthquake has been estimated by modern seismologists at approximately 7.2 based on analyses of the rupture along the Sparta fault system, which produced a visible 20-kilometer-long scarp, and the scale of reported destruction in ancient Laconia. The earthquake inflicted catastrophic damage on the city of Sparta, demolishing most buildings and leaving only 5 houses standing, as reported by ancient sources, including Plutarch and Strabo. The destruction was so severe that the city was effectively razed to its foundations, with structures such as the gymnasium collapsing on groups of young Spartans exercising inside. In surrounding areas of Laconia, the earthquake demolished other settlements and infrastructure, with damage patterns indicating a concentrated zone of maximum intensity along the Eurotas River Valley. Effects extended to nearby towns, where similar liquefaction and fault-related hazards contributed to ruinous impacts, though less severe than in Sparta itself. Farther afield in Messenia, destruction was comparatively milder, sparing the Pamissos Valley from the full extent of Spartan-level devastation. Plutarch later referenced enduring archaeological traces, such as a tomb termed seismata, meaning earthquakes, attesting to the event's physical legacy in the region. Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BC, recorded that the earthquake caused over 20,000 deaths in Sparta, attributing the catastrophe to the collapse of structures amid severe shaking that also affected other Peloponnesian areas. This estimate, implying roughly half the local population perished, stems from later Hellenistic traditions rather than contemporary records, and is viewed by modern seismologists and historians as inflated, incompatible with Sparta's estimated total inhabitants of 40,000 to 50,000, including non-citizens, where citizen males numbered only several thousand. Actual fatalities likely reached thousands, concentrated among those in dense urban structures, though precise figures remain unverifiable absent archaeological corroboration of mass graves or skeletal evidence tied to the event. Thucydides, composing his history around 411 BC, offered the nearest account to the event, labeling it the most intense earthquake in Hellenic memory for the region. He noted it toppled much of Sparta, inflicted substantial human losses, and directly incited Helot defections to Mount Ithome, exploiting the Spartans' disarray. His narrative prioritizes causal linkage to the ensuing revolt over descriptive detail, reflecting a rationalist's dismissal of divine portents in favor of observable political fallout, without specifying casualty numbers or personal testimonies. The collapse of the city created an immediate vulnerability that the Helots, Sparta's state-owned serfs, numbering perhaps 7-to-1 relative to citizens, exploited for revolt. Primarily Messenian Helots, descendants of populations subjugated in the earlier Messenian Wars, initiated the uprising, viewing the disaster as a divine opportunity to overthrow their oppressors after generations of enforced agricultural labor and ritual humiliation. Thucydides reports that Helots and some perioikoi, free non-citizen neighbors, simultaneously seceded to the stronghold of Mount Ithome in Messenia, fortifying it against Spartan forces. The revolt, termed the Third Messenian War, endured approximately a decade, 464 to 455 BC, with rebels under leaders like Aristomenes, a figure possibly legendary in later accounts, sustaining resistance through the mountain's defensibility and local support. Sparta, hampered by citizen losses, mobilized allies via the Peloponnesian League but struggled in initial assaults on Ithome. In 463 BC, Spartans requested Athenian aid, which arrived under Cimon but was controversially dismissed amid suspicions of Athenian democratic sympathies with the rebels, straining the post-Persian War alliance. By 455 BC, after prolonged siege and starvation tactics, the Messenian Helots surrendered on terms allowing safe exodus. Athens resettled about 3,000 at Naupactus, providing a base for future anti-Spartan operations. The suppression reinforced Spartan paranoia toward Helots, prompting intensified controls like the Crypteia, secret police hunts, and annual declarations of war on them, though it exposed underlying demographic fragility where Helot numbers far exceeded citizens. Ancient sources attribute the revolt's spark to the earthquake's chaos rather than organized conspiracy, though some later interpretations, like Pausanias, link it to prior Spartan sacrilege against suppliant Helots. After the rebels to negotiate a withdrawal under truce terms in approximately 459 BC, thereby restoring the Spartans' control over their territory, physical reconstruction of Sparta proceeded with relative dispatch. facilitated by the city's characteristically austere architecture of timber-framed mud brick homes and barracks rather than durable stone monuments, which minimize the need for extensive engineering or foreign expertise. The absence of elaborate public edifices allowed survivors to rebuild functionally using local materials and labor, aligning with Lycurgan principles of simplicity and self-sufficiency. No major architectural innovations or imported styles are attested in the aftermath, underscoring how Spartan communal discipline enabled rapid societal reconstitution without dependency on external powers. Spartan resilience manifested politically in their deliberate dismissal of the Athenian force after initial utility, reportedly on advice from Regent Pausanias to avert perceptions of subservience, a decision that preserved internal cohesion but strained alliances and foreshadowed broader Hellenic conflicts. This strategic autonomy, coupled with intensified measures against Helot unrest, such as enhanced surveillance and military training, sustained the oligarchic warrior ethos despite irreplaceable losses, allowing Sparta to project power in subsequent decades, including leadership in the Peloponnesian War. Empirical evidence from fault studies confirms the event's severity along the Sparta Fault, yet the polity's endurance highlights causal factors like rigorous apoge training and land-based equality among Spartiates in fostering recovery over mere survival. The 464 BC earthquake precipitated the Third Messenian War through the Helot Revolt, exposing Sparta's structural vulnerabilities and prompting temporary reliance on external allies, which reshaped interstate dynamics in the Peloponnese. Sparta, devastated by the lost life, including a significant portion of its citizen warrior class, sought assistance from Athens under Cimon. They dispatched 4,000 hoplites to aid in suppressing the uprising at Ithome. However, Spartan eventually dismissed the Athenian contingent, suspecting their democratic ideals might inspire Helot unrest or internal dissent, an act perceived by Athenians as a betrayal that severed the post-Persian War alliance. This rupture, as noted in ancient accounts, marked the initial fracture in Spartan-Athenian relations, contributing directly to the First Peloponnesian War and indirectly fostered animosities that culminated in the Great Peloponnesian War decades later. The crisis intensified Sparta's perennial fear of Helot insurrection, reinforcing oligarchic controls such as the Cryptia, a state-sanctioned secret police mechanism for terrorizing potential rebels without altering the fundamental dual kingship and ephoret system. Demographically, the disaster accelerated oliganthropia, the shrinkage of the Spartiates from an estimated 8,000 to 9,000 adult males pre-earthquake to fewer than 2,000 by the late 5th century BC, as the high casualty rate among this elite hindered recovery and compelled greater dependence on perioikoi auxiliaries and Peloponnesian League members. Yet, Sparta's suppression of the revolt by 455 BC, following a decade-long siege, reaffirmed its hegemony, as allies like Tegea remained loyal and the League's structure endured, albeit with Sparta adopting a more cautious foreign policy to mask internal frailties. In the broader Hellenic context, the event underscored the fragility of Spartan exceptionalism, prompting rivals like Argos to probe weaknesses during the interregnum of instability, though without permanent territorial losses. Long-term, it embedded a legacy of mutual suspicion with Athens, evident in Sparta's refusal of Athenian appeals during later crises like the Battle of Tanagra in 457 BC, perpetuating a bipolar rivalry that defined Greek politics until Sparta's Pyrrhic victory in 404 BC. This causal chain, rooted in the earthquake's disruption of Spartans' manpower and authority, illustrates how natural disasters can catalyze enduring power shifts, absent adaptive reforms. In the end, Sparta survived the rubble. Because their society relied on austere, timber-framed mud brick homes rather than grand stone monuments, they were able to rebuild with ruthless efficiency. By 455 BC, after a grueling decade of siege and starvation tactics, they finally forced the Helot rebels on Mount Ithome to surrender. To the outside world, it looked as though the Spartan war machine had simply brushed off the apocalypse and reclaimed its hegemony. But the Sparta that emerged from the dust was fundamentally, permanently broken. The earthquake accelerated a quiet but devastating demographic collapse known as oliganthropy. From a pre-disaster peak of nearly 9,000 elite adult males, the Spartan citizen warrior class plummeted to fewer than 2,000 by the late 5th century BC. To mask this fatal shortage of manpower, Spartan discipline warped into crippling paranoia. Terrified of another helot uprising, the state intensified the Cryptia, their state-sanctioned secret police, hunting down potential dissidents in the shadows just to keep their massive, subjugated population in check. The geopolitical tremors of 464 BC, however, never stopped echoing. The moment Sparta dismissed the 4,000 Athenian hoplites sent to aid them, they severed the post-Persian War alliance for good. It was an act of profound distrust that set the stage for a bipolar rivalry between the two superpowers. It was the first fracture that directly paved the way for the Great Peloponnesian War. Nature did what no rival army ever could. A single fault line beneath the Eurotas River Valley didn't just topple a city. It exposed the fragility of Spartan exceptionalism, catalyzed an enduring shift in power, and fundamentally rewrote the history of the ancient world.